My dad and stepmom packed their bags for a week-long trip with their daughter, my so-called sister, leaving me behind like I was the family dog. But I made sure their perfect vacation would never happen. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is May. I'm 19, a college student, and lately, I feel like a stranger in my own house. My dad, Tom, remarried 2 years ago. His new wife, Laura, came with a 10-year-old daughter named Ellie, and from the first week, I could tell things would never be the same. Laura smiled sweetly in front of Dad, but when he wasn't around, she treated me like extra furniture. She took over the house, changed the curtains, the dishes, even the smell. It was like she wanted to erase everything that reminded Dad of my mom. At first, I tried to keep peace. I stayed out of the way, helped with chores, smiled when I didn't want to. But every small thing I did seemed to annoy Laura. If I left my shoes near the door, she sighed loudly. If I studied at the kitchen table, she'd say I was cluttering her space. Dad always took her side. "She's trying to make everyone comfortable," he said once. I stopped arguing after that. When summer came, I overheard them talking about a family trip to Florida. I waited for them to mention my name, to say they had a ticket for me too. They never did. One evening, I asked Laura casually if she needed help packing. She gave me that fake smile and said, "Oh honey, it's just for the 3 of us this time. You understand, right? You're an adult now." My stomach dropped. I laughed it off, but inside I was shaking. They didn't just forget about me. They decided to leave me behind on purpose. That night, I heard them laughing in their room, talking about how peaceful it would be without me there. I cried quietly so they wouldn't hear. I felt small, unwanted, and stupid for still hoping my dad cared. But while I sat there, wiping my tears, something inside me changed. I was done feeling like a ghost in my own home. I started remembering little things, like the expensive necklace Laura wore last month, or the new phone she bought though Dad was complaining about bills. I thought about the locked drawer in her office, the one she always kept the key to on her bracelet. I didn't know what I'd find, but I knew one thing for sure. They didn't deserve their perfect little getaway while I sat here forgotten. So I waited. I smiled when they loaded their suitcases, waved goodbye at the door, and said, "Have fun." But the moment the car disappeared down the street, I turned and walked straight to Lara's office. For the first time, I wasn't scared. I was ready to make sure their vacation never happened. Dad used to be warm. He used to laugh easily and ask about my classes, bring home my favorite coffee just because. But after Laura came, that man faded away. It didn't happen overnight. It was small things at first, him missing my calls, forgetting plans, brushing off things I said. Then one day, it was like I was just a guest in the house where I grew up. Laura had this way of sounding kind even when she was cutting you down. She'd tell Dad that she wanted peace in the house, that the energy felt off when I was around. I didn't need to guess who she meant. Soon, she started finding reasons to keep me away. She said my music was too loud, my studying at the kitchen table was distracting, my friends were a bad influence. I moved most of my things into my room, just to avoid hearing her voice. The house became quieter, not in a peaceful way, but in a suffocating one. I'd hear them downstairs watching movies, laughing. I'd stay upstairs, pretending to be busy with homework, trying to ignore the sound of them bonding, while I felt the distance growing thicker every day. One afternoon, I came home early and heard Laura in the living room. I stopped when I realized she was on the phone with Dad. Her voice was low but sharp. "She's a burden, Tom. She's too old to be hanging around here. College girls always cause trouble." I didn't move. I just stood there, my heart pounding, feeling like I'd been punched. I waited for Dad to defend me, to say something, anything. He didn't. He just sighed and said, "I'll talk to her." After that, something in me shut off. I didn't bother trying to make him see me anymore. I kept my head down, did my chores, and said as little as possible. Every time Laura smiled at me, I could feel the poison behind it. When Dad looked at me, I could see how much of her had already taken root in him. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake listening to the quiet hum of the TV downstairs, wondering when exactly I'd stopped being his daughter and started being a problem to fix. Sometimes I thought about leaving, finding my own place, but I didn't have the money. And part of me didn't want to give them that victory. So I stayed. I watched them live their perfect little life while I became a ghost inside my own home. And the longer it went on, the less I felt sad about it. Sadness turned into something colder, heavier. I didn't know what I'd do yet, but I could feel it building inside me, something waiting for the right moment to break free. The day before they were set to leave, I stood in the driveway, helping Dad load the suitcases into the back of the car. The sun was hot, the air sticky, and everything about that morning felt rehearsed. Laura giving orders, Dad nodding along, Ellie bouncing around with her stuffed dolphin. I smiled, kept my tone light, and acted like everything was normal. Inside, my stomach was tight, but I hid it well. Lara was checking off a list, her manicured fingers tapping on her phone. Flights, hotel, car rental, she murmured. I leaned over her shoulder, pretending to glance at the list. And that's when I saw it, 3 names on the flight confirmation. Tom, Lara, Ellie. My own name nowhere in sight. My throat went dry. I waited for Dad to notice, to realize what that meant, but he didn't even look up. He just said, "We should get going early tomorrow, traffic will be bad." I tried to sound casual. "So, just the 3 of you?" Lara turned to me with that sugary tone she always used when she wanted to sting without showing it. "You're an adult now, sweetie. You'll manage, right?" She smiled like she'd done me a favor. I nodded slowly, pretending to agree. "Yeah, of course." After that, I went back to my room, shut the door, and sat on the floor. I stared at my suitcase, the one I'd packed just in case they changed their mind. I felt stupid for hoping. I unpacked it quietly, one piece of clothing at a time, folding each shirt with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. That night, I couldn't sleep. Through the thin wall, I heard them talking and laughing in their room, voices low but clear enough to catch pieces of their conversation. Lara said something about how peaceful the week would be without me. Dad chuckled. That sound, his laugh, hit harder than any insult she could have thrown. I pressed my hand against my chest, trying to steady my breathing. For a moment, I thought I might scream or run out and confront them. Instead, I sat there in the dark, my tears drying on my face. Something inside me shifted, like a door finally closing. The ache that had been sitting in my chest for months turned cold, clean, and sharp. By morning, the house would feel lighter for them, just like Lara wanted. But I wasn't going to be their forgotten daughter anymore. They could go chase their sunshine and family photos. I was done begging for a place in their picture. I stood by my window, watching the streetlights flicker on. The decision came quiet, simple, without drama. They didn't get to humiliate me again. Not this time. When the house finally went quiet, I sat in the dark and let my thoughts settle. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the loud, shaking way I had been. It was a quiet kind of anger now, focused, deliberate. I didn't want to hurt anyone's body or scream at anyone's face. I wanted truth. I wanted to break the little dream Lara built, the one where she played the perfect wife, and I was just the shadow in the corner. I started by thinking about what I'd seen over the past few months, the small things that never added up. The jewelry that shimmered on her wrist, though Dad was constantly complaining about money. The new shoes that came in boxes she hid under the bed. The envelopes she tucked inside her desk drawer every time someone walked into the room. I'd noticed all of it, but I'd told myself it wasn't my business. Now it was. I slipped into her office, careful with every step. The floor creaked near the doorway, so I stepped around it. The glow from the streetlight outside was just enough to see her desk. The bottom drawer was locked, but she always kept the tiny silver key on her bracelet. She'd left it hanging on the side table, careless after a long day of packing. I slid it off quietly and turned the key. Inside were folders, credit card statements, and a few glossy envelopes. I flipped through them, keeping my breathing slow. There were bills from stores my dad would never go near, high-end boutiques, spas, hotels in the next town over. Then I found something worse. Printouts of text messages, maybe ones she meant to delete but wanted to keep. Messages from a man named Grant. The words were short, familiar, and unmistakably intimate. My hands didn't shake. I just kept reading until I was sure of what I had. Then I started gathering. I used my phone to take pictures, one by one, careful not to move anything from its place. Every photo felt like a step closer to evening the score. When I finished, I put everything back exactly the way it was and locked the drawer. I returned the bracelet to the same spot, then stood there for a moment, listening to the sound of the house breathing, Lara's soft snoring down the hall, Ellie's little hums in her sleep, my dad's heavy breaths that used to comfort me when I was younger. By morning, I knew what I needed to do. It wasn't about yelling or making a scene. I wasn't going to beg my dad to believe me. I would show him what was already in front of him, make the cracks visible, let their perfect story collapse under its own weight. When the sun came through my window, I was still sitting at my desk, staring at the pictures. I knew exactly where they needed to go. The morning they left, I watched their car disappear down the street until the sound of the engine faded. The house felt still, almost too quiet. I waited a few minutes just to be sure they wouldn't turn back for something they forgot. When the silence settled completely, I went inside and locked the door behind me. Their suitcases were gone, but Lara's office still smelled faintly of her perfume. I stepped inside, my heartbeat steady. The light through the blinds striped across the desk like bars. I pulled open the drawers one by one, not rushing. Inside the top one were piles of neatly arranged receipts, clipped together by date. Spa visits, jewelry stores, even a hotel in another city. I flipped one over and froze when I saw the name on the card, Tom's business account. The charges were large, Some dated during weeks when Lara claimed she was visiting her sister. I pulled out my phone and began snapping pictures, one by one, careful to keep the papers in their exact place. Each click of the camera sounded louder than it should have, echoing through the quiet house. My hands didn't shake. It felt like I'd done this before, like I'd been preparing for it long before I ever decided to act. When I finished, I turned on the family laptop that sat on the side table. The screen blinked to life, still logged into my dad's shared email folder. I opened a new message and stared at the blank page. For a moment, doubt crept in. Maybe I was going too far. Maybe this would ruin him, not her. But then I remembered the way Lara laughed last night, the way he laughed with. The sound burned in my ears. I began to type. The words came out calm and simple, nothing emotional. Just facts, dates, charges, names of the businesses, and a short note explaining that the firm might want to check for possible misuse of company funds by a partner's spouse. I signed it with no name, no clue that it came from me. My finger hovered over the send button for a long second. I could almost hear my dad's voice asking me to think it through, but that voice belonged to the man who used to care. The one left in this house didn't. I exhaled, pressed the key, and watched the email vanish into the outbox. The air in the room shifted after that. I closed the laptop, wiped my fingerprints off the lid, and stood there listening. Somewhere down the street, a plane passed overhead, faint and distant. It was probably theirs. I pictured them smiling, thinking everything was perfect. They had no idea the first domino had already fallen. The weekend stretched out like a blank page. I barely left my room, barely spoke. The house sat heavy and still, the air thick with the kind of quiet that hums in your ears. I moved through it like a shadow, washing dishes, reading, pretending to study, acting like nothing had changed. But under that calm, something sharp and electric ran through me. Every time I thought about what I'd done, my chest tightened, not from fear exactly, but from a strange thrill I didn't know how to name. Sunday came and went. I didn't check my phone much, didn't reach out to anyone. The calm before impact felt almost peaceful. I pictured them somewhere in an airport, smiling for photos, posting nothing, believing their world was untouchable. I let them have that. Monday passed the same way, gray and slow. I went through my routine like a machine, waiting for something I couldn't quite imagine. It came on Tuesday morning. My phone buzzed just as I was pouring coffee. The caller ID showed my dad's office number. For a second, I froze. Then I answered. A man's voice, not Dad's, spoke politely, too formally. He asked if Tom was home. When I said he wasn't, there was a pause. Then he said something about temporary suspension pending an internal review. My throat went dry. I didn't ask questions. I just said I'd pass along the message. When the call ended, I stood there for a long minute, staring at the floor. It had begun. Not long after, my phone buzzed again, this time with a voicemail notification. I pressed play. Lara's voice exploded through the speaker, high and frantic. May, what did you do? You think this is funny? You've ruined everything. Do you understand me? Everything. She was gasping between words, her tone wobbling between rage and panic. Then the message cut off. I didn't replay it. I didn't need to. Beneath all that anger was something else, fear. She wasn't just furious, she was terrified. I'd seen her type before, all confidence and control until the surface cracked. I knew she'd be scrambling now, trying to piece together how anyone could have known, how much was exposed, how to stop it before it reached Dad. I sat on the couch, holding the phone loosely in my hand, staring at the faint reflection of my face on the black screen. My pulse was steady. There was no rush of guilt, no regret clawing at me, just quiet certainty. The truth had been planted, and now it was growing, spreading through the walls of their perfect little life like a slow fire. Somewhere, Lara was realizing that her carefully built story was slipping away, and the one person she'd dismissed as harmless held all the proof she couldn't explain away. They came back sooner than I expected. The sound of the car rolling into the driveway broke the quiet afternoon, tires crunching against the gravel. I watched from the kitchen window as they climbed out. No smiles, no luggage chatter, just tight movements and tense faces. Lara's sunglasses hid her eyes, but her mouth was a hard line. Dad looked older, drained, his shoulders stiff as he shut the trunk. I didn't move to greet them. I just sat at the table, a mug of cold coffee in front of me, waiting. The front door opened with a heavy slam. Their voices came next, low at first, then sharper. Dad called my name, not in the gentle tone he used to use, but clipped and demanding. I turned slowly as they entered the room. "What did you do?" he asked, his voice rough, eyes locked on mine. He looked desperate, like he already knew but needed to hear it out loud. Lara stood behind him, silent for once, clutching her phone like it could save her. I didn't answer right away. I reached for the folder I'd placed on the counter earlier, the same one that had been sitting in her office drawer, filled with every receipt, every copied page. I slid it across the table toward him. "You should see for yourself," I said. He hesitated, then opened it. Page after page, his expression shifted. First confusion, then disbelief, then something heavier. When he reached the last page, I unlocked my phone and pressed play. The room filled with Lara's voice, soft and cold. Once Tom's out, we can finally sell the house. We'll be free. The silence that followed felt endless. Dad didn't look up. His hands stayed on the table, fingers pressed flat against the papers. Lara took a small step back, her lips parting, but no sound came out. All that practiced confidence, she wore like armor, cracked right there in front of me. Tom, it's not, she started, but he finally raised his head, and whatever she was going to say died in her throat. I stayed sitting, my voice steady. You wanted peace, right? You have it now. Neither of them spoke. The only sound in the house was the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. I stood and gathered the empty mug, rinsing it in the sink. My reflection in the window looked calm, almost detached. I turned back to face them. Lara looked pale, her hands trembling slightly. Dad's eyes were glassy, full of a kind of hurt I didn't know how to comfort. I met his gaze and said quietly, I'm done being invisible. Then I walked past them toward the hallway. Neither followed. The only thing that moved was the paper on the counter, fluttering in the soft draft as the truth finally settled between us. Lara's voice cracked first. She started with soft denial, her tone trembling like she was the one who'd been betrayed. Tom, you know how people twist things, she said, stepping closer to him. Her hands reached for his arm, but he pulled away before she could touch him. Tears came fast, perfectly timed, sliding down her face as she tried to sound small, harmless. I didn't mean for any of this to look bad, she whispered, voice breaking. Those receipts, those messages, they don't mean what you think. Dad didn't say a word. He just stood there, eyes fixed on the stack of papers still spread across the counter. Every time she tried to get his attention, he looked more distant, like he was watching something inside him quietly dissolve. When she realized her performance wasn't working, the tears turned desperate. You're going to throw away everything we built over some stupid misunderstanding? She shouted. I was there for you when no one else was. Don't let her. She turned toward me, her voice sharp. Don't let her destroy this family. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth was sitting between us, louder than either of us could speak. Dad finally reached for his phone. Lara froze when she heard him say the words, I need to speak with my lawyer. Her face twisted, panic replacing anger. She lunged for the papers, but he stopped her with a look so calm it made her step back. Don't, he said quietly. Just stop. The next hour unfolded like a scene she couldn't control. She moved around the house quickly, opening drawers, slamming them shut, throwing clothes into a bag. The calm she used to wear was gone. Every motion was frantic, messy. Ellie stood in the hallway clutching her stuffed dolphin, her little face wet with tears. Mom, what's happening? She kept asking, her voice cracking. Lara couldn't answer her. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Guilt slid through me in thin waves, but it didn't take root. For all the chaos, I knew this was the truth surfacing, and there was no undoing it. I knelt down next to Ellie and said softly, It's going to be okay. She didn't respond, just clung tighter to her toy. Lara's suitcase thudded shut. She turned once toward Dad, eyes wide, waiting for him to change his mind. He didn't. Without another word, she walked out, dragging Ellie behind her. The door slammed, and the house went still again. I stood there, staring at the space they'd left behind. The air felt clearer, lighter, as if something poisonous had finally burned off. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel like hers. It felt like mine again. A month passed, and the house settled into a new kind of quiet. The air felt cleaner, though the silence had weight. Lara was gone, and so was the sharp edge of tension that had lived in every corner. Most of her things had been packed and taken within days, leaving behind only faint traces. An empty perfume bottle in the bathroom, a small dent in the couch cushion where she used to sit. Ellie hadn't come back either. The echoes of their voices had finally faded, and for the first time in years, the walls didn't feel like they were holding their breath. Dad spent most days at his desk, buried under paperwork. I could hear the low murmur of his calls from my room, his tone clipped and tired. The firm had reinstated him, but the damage had left its mark. He was quieter now, more careful with his words. Sometimes I caught him staring at the front door like he half expected someone to walk through. When he noticed me watching, he'd force a faint smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. We didn't talk much. Meals were mostly silent, the scrape of forks louder than the conversation. But the silence wasn't hostile anymore. It was just strange, unfamiliar. I'd catch him studying me sometimes, like he was seeing me for the first time and didn't know what to do with that. I didn't help him fill the gaps. I didn't know how either. Evenings were the hardest. He'd sit on the porch with a drink, the glow from the porch light soft against the dark. Sometimes I'd join him, sitting in the next chair without a word. The first few times, we didn't look at each other. Eventually, he started talking, not about her, but about work, the garden, small things that didn't matter much. It was awkward, but it was something. One night, the air was cooler, the sky clear. He stared out into the yard, swirling the glass in his hand, and said quietly, "I should have seen it. All of it." His voice was rough, heavy with something he couldn't name. I didn't respond. He looked over at me, eyes tired but softer than I remembered. "You didn't do it to hurt me," he said. "You did it because I wouldn't see what was right in front of me." "Thank you." I kept my gaze on the yard. The words didn't need an answer. I just nodded once, slow and steady. We sat there for a long time, the sound of crickets filling the silence between us. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it wasn't anger either. The distance between us had started to shrink, inch by inch, carried by the quiet understanding that nothing would ever go back to how it was. But maybe it didn't need to. The nights had grown quieter, the house softer somehow. The air no longer felt heavy, and for the first time in a long while, I could breathe without feeling like I had to hide. I spent more time alone now, not because I was shut out, but because I finally chose to be. The noise in my head had settled, leaving behind a strange calm I didn't recognize. Sometimes, when I walked past the living room, I'd catch sight of the faint mark on the wall where one of Lara's paintings used to hang. It reminded me of how quickly something that looked perfect could vanish. I didn't feel joy from what happened, not really. It wasn't triumph. It was something quieter, like standing in the ruins of a storm and realizing you survived it. One evening, while sorting through my desk drawer, I found a small wooden frame pushed to the back. Inside was a picture from years ago, me, Dad, and Mom standing in front of the old house before everything changed. Dad's arm around her shoulders, her smile bright and real. I traced her face with my thumb, the edges of the glass cool beneath my skin. The ache that rose in my chest wasn't sharp anymore. It was gentle, almost peaceful. I thought about everything that had happened, the lies, the distance, the nights I spent wishing things could go back to how they were. And then I thought about the moment I stopped wishing and started acting. I wasn't proud of the path I took, but I couldn't lie to myself. I didn't regret it either. The truth had been buried too long, and I'd only uncovered what was already rotting beneath the surface. The laptop sat open beside me, the folders still there, the photos, the files, the evidence that had changed everything. I hovered the cursor over them, staring for a long time. Those files had power once. Now they just felt like ghosts. I clicked through one last image, then selected them all and dragged them into the trash. The screen flashed briefly before going still again. I leaned back, staring at the dark reflection staring back at me. "You'd have done the same thing, Mom," I whispered, barely above a breath. Saying it out loud didn't feel like justification. It felt like release. Then I shut the laptop, pushed the photo frame upright on my desk, and turned off the light. The room dimmed into soft shadow. I didn't look back as I walked out. The past was still there, somewhere behind me, but it didn't hold me anymore. The house, the quiet, the empty walls, they finally felt like mine. Hey besties, thanks for staying with me till the end of this wild story. Watching someone betray you in your own home cuts deep, but standing up for yourself changes everything. Sometimes peace comes after burning down the lies that trapped you. If this story hit you hard, don't forget to like, share, drop a comment, and subscribe for more real, raw stories. See you in the next one. Bye!